So you may have noticed in my pop-up menu of fonts here, or in the Show Fonts window, Command T, or even in the font book application, that I may have many fonts here that you might not have on your system. There are a set of default fonts that come with your OS, and those are all accessible within Motion, but frequently you want to add to that collection. So I want to talk a little bit about where to get fonts, because a big factor in what your text animation looks like is your choice of font. And there are a lot of sites out there for free fonts, but many of them are not available for commercial use. You'll find fonts and think they're great, but if you read the user agreement, you'll find that in fact you can't use them for commercial purposes. However, there are a couple of good resources that I want to point out to you briefly here. One is called Font Squirrel. At fontsquirrel.com, they have fonts that are free for commercial use. And that's what I love about this site. 100% free for commercial use. So I definitely recommend checking this out, looking through it. If you're looking, let's say I want font that looks like graffiti. So I type in graffiti, and there's a bunch of graffiti type fonts. So many of these fonts are completely free and 100% free. So basically everything here is free. You really want to check the user license agreement to make sure, but you can get a ton of great fonts here. Throw them into Font Book. You just double click on them and they'll load into Font Book, or you can drag them into Font Book and you'll have a bunch more fonts. Another thing that's kind of cool is this thing called yourfonts.com. This used to be free. It's not free anymore, but it can be really worth it because you can create a font, as it says here, from your own handwriting. And basically what you do is you print out a little template. They look like these things up here. You write in your fonts, you scan them and upload them, and they deliver back to you a font that you can use, which is really cool. So especially if you're good with design, you're good at handwriting. My handwriting actually is horrible, but I've used it. Check this out. If I go back to Motion and I look up in the pop-up window, we'll see we have one here. Let's see. Go back up a little bit. Here's one called Mark's Handwriting. Okay, you can see there's my horrendous handwriting, but it's a font. It's not a graphic. The cool thing about that being a font is you can type anything you want and you can animate it as a font. Because it's a text layer, we can do all kind of cool things with that with a handwritten font. I did another one called Mark Paint, where I literally used a, like a calligraphy pen to do a more grungy kind of look. So you can make a fun grunge font, especially even if you don't know what you're doing. You can make your own fonts and use them in Motion or any application, because once you do this, they're installed in your system. So definitely something worth checking out. Finally, if you're really into it, you can actually design your own font. There's a site called fontlab.com, and there's a tool they have called Type Tool where you can really design beautiful fonts for yourself. So if you're really into it, that's another thing I'd recommend for fonts. Now, one more thing that is really pretty cool is this. If you're using Motion, there's a good chance you're also using Final Cut Pro 10. And Final Cut Pro 10 ships with a whole bunch of fonts that aren't available in your OS. And they're not available in Motion. They're hidden within Final Cut Pro. But I want to show you where those are, because you can add them to Font Book and have access to them in Motion. So what you do, in the Finder, I'm going to go to the Applications folder. I'm going to press F to get to Final Cut. There it is. I'm going to right-click on it and choose Show Package Contents. And then here's where we're going to go. We'll go to Contents, then we'll go to Frameworks, then we're going to go down to this thing called TextFramework.Framework, into Versions, into A, into Resources, and finally, check it out, Fonts. And look at that. Here's a whole bunch of really cool fonts that aren't installed in your system by default. They're only available in Final Cut Pro, but you can get access to them in Motion. So what you would do, let's go to Font Book, and you can see I've already created a new category here called Final Cut Pro 10, but let's to do it from scratch, you would click the plus button down here, My Cool Fonts, and then you could select all those fonts and just drag them right into this pane. I'm not going to do it since I already have them in there, but you just drag them in and it adds them to Font Book, and then they're available. I'm going to get rid of this My Cool Fonts. I'll just select it and hit Command Delete and remove it. But this Final Cut Pro 10 category is what I use to add all of those fonts in Final Cut Pro to Font Book. So now if I go back to Motion and I hit Command T while I'm in Motion, I've got that same category of fonts to choose from.